JaWuan James opting out of this season. So first of all, before we get into the implications of what that means for the roster, what are the implications in your mind as it means to the offensive line and the offense in general?
Well, I mean, it is a tough blow. You know, when you brought in JaWuan James, he had at the time the number one contract for a right tackle in the NFL. You made a heavy investment in him. You believed in his ability to protect that side of the offensive line. It is a huge thing. But then with depth on top of it, I mean, the Broncos don't have a ton of depth at offensive tackle. You had ostensibly a competition at left tackle going into camp with Garrett Bowles and Elijah Wilkinson. Calvin Anderson, Jake Rogers, those seem like down roster guys. So it is a huge blow. The upside is you've got Elijah Wilkinson. He played almost 800 snaps, I believe, last year at right tackle. Does have experience at it. And, the coaching staff really, really believes in him. So before I get too down on Elijah Wilkinson playing right tackle, I guess I'll defer to the judgment of Hall of Fame offensive line coach Mike Munchak and say, hey, let's see what he's got.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And the Broncos, of course, are bullish on Elijah Wilkinson, too. We'll get to that in just a second. But as far as for JaWuan James, there's a lot of fans that are kind of upset. I mean, I think when a guy only plays 63 snaps, you mentioned the contract, it's fair to say that the fans had higher expectations. But there is a way that this ends up being kind of a happy ending for everybody involved. I mean, JaWuan James is going to be on this roster next year. They just push forward the cap hit. So, I mean, in this case, he's going to be on this roster. He's going to get a chance to really still prove himself to this team and the fan base.
Well, yeah, JaWuan will get the opportunity to do that next year. He gets one more year to fully get his body healthy. He's been a guy who's been accused at times of, being an every other year player. But I think that JaWuan wants to shed certain reputations about himself. I think he just made the best decision that he could make for him and his family. And who am I to begrudge, man, the opportunity to keep his family safe versus making money? That's an individual decision that every person's got to make. And, I don't begrudge him that at all.
All right, so let's go to Elijah Wilkinson, who obviously immediately slots in at right tackle, unless, of course, they decide to open things up for competition, which we could get into as well. But for Elijah Wilkinson, you've been on the radio show a little bit more bullish about him sliding into that. You mentioned how many snaps he's played there. But one of the things that you brought up on the show is that he, throughout the course of the season, was still preparing as if he had to potentially play guard. And so in your mind, you think that this is an opportunity where he comes into the season knowing this is the position you're playing, which will be valuable.
Right. I think there is something to that. Last year, I know for a fact there were several games where Elijah Wilkinson didn't know what position he was playing until 9 p.m. on Saturday night before an early Sunday game. He would practice at guard all week, and then he would get kicked out to tackle. And it can be tough to do. That's a tough transition for an offensive lineman. There's a different skill set involved in playing tackle than there is in playing guard. And we saw Elijah get beat a little bit by the speed rush at times last year. I think he'll be able to concentrate more on his footwork and his kick slide going back. And doing the things that he needs to do to protect at the tackle position, and knowing that he has to do that going into each game rather than the swing tackle role or playing guard, maybe spelling Ron Leary like he was last year at times. I think that'll be a great benefit for him. So I don't think we've seen a maximized Elijah Wilkinson by any stretch. I think this year will be good for him. Second year with that offensive line coach, and first full year, I think, practicing at that position.
Now, of course, we are going to miss out on competition to left tackle. That was one thing we were all preparing for here in training camp, competition between Garrett Bowles and Elijah Wilkinson. Are you a little disappointed we're missing out on that?
Not really. I think that there were two outcomes there. Either Garrett Bowles was going to take the position and be the left tackle that they wanted to be, or Elijah was going to lap him and be the left tackle anyway. So any which way you slice it, you were going to get some combination of JaWuan James, Garrett Bowles, and Elijah Wilkinson. So I don't really believe. I mean, if you don't believe in Garrett Bowles, then Elijah beats him out for the left tackle spot. Then he's a starting tackle anyway. So I don't understand how people can be so down on Elijah Wilkinson at tackle. I understand being down on the depth. I don't understand being down on the player.
Ben, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about Calvin Anderson and Jake Rogers at offensive tackle. Would you open up competition there for the right tackle position, or do you feel like because you don't have preseason and we have a short amount of window here in training camp that maybe you just kind of lean heavily on Elijah Wilkinson's the guy?
I think in a normal preseason, you would open it up for competition. In a normal preseason, you'd have ample ramp-up time. You'd have the ability to move guys in and out. You just have such a limited window and a limited time frame this year that I don't feel like that's that may be counterproductive. You may get 3 guys in there battling it out, and all you've done is trim the reps for each of those guys. So me personally, I think you identify the guy. If you've got faith in Elijah Wilkinson, you put him out there, and then you try to squeeze in reps for the other guys where you can, and roll with it. But this is not a normal preseason, and I think they're going to have to adjust fire a little bit.
You're bringing up an interesting point there about COVID and the impact it's actually going to have on a lot of offensive lines. I mean, this year, I think almost every team has to be under the assumption their depth is going to be tested to the point that you might even have, because close proximity of the offensive line, an opportunity or a moment where you're going to have to quarantine the entire offensive line. So it's not like you're going to find a starting caliber right tackle just out there in free agency right now, are you?
No, I mean, there are guys out there that could probably do a serviceable job. I think there are guys that could start in this league, but not without questions, whether that's injury, age, whatever. I think you need to adopt a +1 attitude, and that is whatever you think could possibly go wrong this season, +1 to make sure you're covered on those kinds of situations. So I'm not opposed to bringing a body in, but if you're doing it, you're going to have to do it quick. You're going to have to make sure that they're COVID tested and ready to go, and you're going to have to make sure that you're not just trimming the reps for everybody just to bring an insurance body in.